Hi, I'm Vahid Razavi with Ethics and Technology. Thank you so much for joining us this evening as we mark and commemorate the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima. Tonight is only 90 minutes in length, and it's overall, in the big picture of things, it's a very small portion of your time. And I'm asking you to pay attention to our presenters and to our content this evening. I want you first and foremost to stop doing what you're doing and give us your undivided attention, as I'm going to ask you in the next few minutes to imagine what the world would have been like. Lend me your imagination and imagine what it would have been like if 100 years ago, during the League of Nations and the start of that, we were actually able to settle our political differences not through war, but through peaceful resolution and conflict resolution. What would have happened if we didn't have the Nazi invasion of Poland, the attack on Pearl Harbor, the invasion of Soviet Union by the Germans? What would have happened if we were actually able to settle our conflicts in places like Vietnam, in the Middle East, with these endless wars? What would have our future looked like if we imagined we didn't have these wars? Unfortunately, I can't tell you that war is over. That's not true. But yet war is the biggest hoax committed against mankind. War is a plague that can be cured, but we don't spend the time and resources to bring our politicians so that they can resolve our differences. Instead, they act with violence. Now, unfortunately, these past few weeks and months, we have seen the military-industrial complex not just be happy in the battlefield, but take the battlefield to the streets, to peaceful protesters, let it be in streets of Beijing, Tehran, Portland, that protesters are being violated and their rights are being undermined in their civil disobedience. And this is really unfortunate. Now today's military and police reach our homes, our cities, our streets. They do blanket surveillance. Killing in the battlefield is not enough, and they want to silence us in our streets. They take folks into custody in uniforms that are unmarked, in private vehicles, just like a police state would. This is not acts of a democratic society. Imagine if all these politicians were not inept and could do their jobs and reach peaceful conflict resolution, what they had been hired to do in the first place. Wouldn't that be great? What would the world look like? Maybe it's because I was raised in a war. I saw Scud missiles, I saw anti-aircraft guns as a child, that I'm so against war. And that's why Ethics in Tech, in most of our events, we talk about killer robots or landmines or nuclear weapons or technologies that can harm mankind. We need to put a ban to weapon systems, to AI that can inflict pain on humanity. We need to be able to put a ban on these kinds of weapons. Now, tonight's presentations might first seem disjointed. We're talking nuclear weapons, we're talking surveillance, we're talking the impact of war on humanity, but truly they're not disjointed. They're part of a military-industrial complex and its wide reach across our society, and they're not just across the battlefield. So when you view tonight's event, please keep that in mind. Also, in all of our events with Ethics in Tech, we mix comedy. So, you know, tears and laughter are two sides of the same coin. And one way to deal with the gruesomeness of war and what these people perpetuate I believe, is to laugh at them, to laugh at their cruelty, laugh at their inhumanity. So tonight, just like every other event we have had, we have wonderful comedians that are going to be introduced by Debbie Durst to entertain you, and we hope you enjoy the event. Finally, I want to say that, we are a small organization. We can't do this without the support of you. We don't receive any outside funding from any corporation. We get money from grant money from Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, and they've been kind enough to sponsor this event. But we could reuse your donations. So if you're in a position to donate, I know it's difficult times, we would appreciate that you would give a few dollars to Ethics in Tech, so that we can continue these efforts and continue to have events like tonight. Tonight's first speaker is Reverend Dorsey Blake. Reverend Dorsey Blake is from the Church of Fellowship of All People in San Francisco, a non-denominational, multicultural church that I've had the pleasure of attending. And it's an interfaith church that welcomes all. And Reverend Blake is going to be kind enough to speak and offer a word of prayer. So, Reverend Blake, if you could kindly unmute.
And thank you, Ethics in Tech, for another very critical forum. It's important for us to gather today and lament what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because it's only through lamenting that we're able to engage our social imagination to create a way forward where everyone needs their vine and fig tree, every nation needs their vine and fig tree to live in peace, unafraid, and with love. A voice is heard in Rama, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are not. Around 8:15 a.m., August 6, 1945, one of the most horrific events in human history occurred. The bomb, named Little Boy, was dropped from the bowels of the Enola Gay and incinerated the city of Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, Nagasaki was bombed. More than 100,000 people died immediately. Many were vaporized, disappeared. Babies in their mother's wombs, gone. Babies outside the wombs, gone. Takashi Tanamori, who spoke at our church some years ago, on that fateful day was 8 years old, a second grader living in Hiroshima, Japan. He was less than a mile from ground zero when the American B-29 bomber dropped an atomic bomb on the city. He was a child, playing hide and seek with his classmates that morning. That was the last thing I remembered for a while, he said. Tanamori saw a flash in the sky, and a second later, the explosion took place. All the color was confiscated, he said. It all happened in pure whiteness. A moment later, the whiteness turned to darkness, and Tanamori could smell the heat coming closer and closer. All the sound in the universe exploded, he said. Eventually, he saw orange, red, blue flames approaching the school and heard the cries of his classmates. "I'm burning, help me," they said. 4 square miles of the city burned that day. A Japanese soldier came, dug me out, and took me from the debris in his arms, Tanamori recalled. The soldier carried him behind the school and down to the beach of one of the 7 rivers that runs through Hiroshima. On the way, they saw a man who asked the soldier for water, but he had none. "Sir," the man said, then put me out of my misery. They also encountered a woman who carried a baby on her back. I cannot erase her from my mind, Tanamori said. The woman was calling her children by name, but as he passed, he saw that the baby was headless. Professor Ron Takaki wrote that during the days before the fateful August 6, 1945 day, General Douglas MacArthur learned that Japan had asked Russia to negotiate a surrender. We expected acceptance of the Japanese surrender daily, one of his staff members recalled. When he was notified that an atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, the general was livid. MacArthur declared that the atomic attack on Hiroshima was completely unnecessary from a military point of view. Dwight Eisenhower also agreed with that. In fact, I think 7 of the top generals of the country agreed with the fact it was not necessary at all. But like many Americans, President Truman had been swept into rage for revenge for the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. This rage had been racialized, Takaki says. Truman repeatedly blasted the enemy as the Japs. This racist term identified the enemy as the Japanese people, in contrast to the term Nazis, which refers only to the followers of Hitler. Truman also dehumanized the enemy in the Pacific War and said, when you have to deal with the beast, you have to treat him as a beast. Time magazine wrote that a demonstration of power against living creatures instead of dead matter created a bottomless wound in the living conscience. The New York Times issued a sobering message. We have been the first to introduce a new weapon of unknowable effects, which may bring us a victory quickly, but which will sow the seeds of hate more widely than ever. We may yet reap the whirlwind. And I raise the question of what happens to the soul of a nation that commits such unthinkable carnage. We are still dealing with the after effects in terms of our soul. What are we called to do right now? Every one of us needs to recommit ourselves to the abolition of nuclear weapons. That is part of our soul's journey. Reverend Nabu Hanaoka was 8 months old and living in Nagasaki, Japan. He has also spoken at the Fellowship Church. He was 8 months old when the bomb was dropped. Both his sister and mother died when he was 6 years old due to radiation. The doctor attending at the death of his sister told the father that Nabu would not live to reach his 10th birthday. Nabu heard this. It's difficult to imagine the trauma, physical, mental, emotional, that has been his companion since that day. Yet he offers us this prayer. That we can have presentation with it. He is a Christian minister, so some of the language is very much coming from the Christian tradition.
Reverend Blake, could you move the mic a little closer to you?
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I hope people a prayer of remembrance for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. O God, the creator of this beautiful planet and all that dwells in it, we now pause to remember the souls of those who perished in the atomic bombings and those who suffer from radiation even now. We join our hearts and voices together to pray for peace everywhere. May the deadly power of nuclear arsenals never be unleashed again upon your sacred creation. May such weapons of mass and indiscriminate annihilations be forever banned and eliminated from the face of the earth. Forgive our silence, O God, and enable your people to raise their prophetic voices to speak against the madness and nuclear pursuits anywhere. Renew our commitment to be faithful stewards of your beautiful creation and vehicles of peace. In the name of Christ, our Prince of Peace. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Blake. Thank you so much, Reverend Blake. And we truly hope that we never have to witness another Hiroshima and Nagasaki in our lifetime. What's concerning is all the weapons that are stockpiled and all the nuclear weapons and ICBMs that the US and Russia and the Chinese have, and we're all pointing at each other, and all it takes is one little mistake for the next war to happen. I want to next introduce Brett Wilkins. Brett is a board member of Ethics and Technology. He has been writing for Ethics and Tech for the past 6 years. He's a member of the Collective 20 and a contributor at Common Dreams and Counterpunch. Brett, it's been a pleasure working with you all these years. I'm going to pass the mic over to you, so it's your forum.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Good evening, and thank you to our host, Vahid, and to all the speakers and comedians here tonight, and all of you out there in Zoom land, from Ethics and Tech first-timers to some of you I see who are returning once again. It's always good to have you back with us. This evening, I'm going to talk about what could have been and what could still be. And, I wrote an article today, it was published in the Asia Times, about, how it was unnecessary to drop the atomic bombs. A little bit what you heard the Reverend just speak of, and you'll hear Janet speak more about it later, I think. So I'm going to talk more about other things tonight, mostly. So historians do continue to debate why the United States waged the only nuclear war in history against an utterly defeated nation that was making significant efforts to surrender. But of course, it fell short of US demands for unconditional capitulation. That demand, we know, was later proven to be a pretense, as Douglas MacArthur, the supreme Allied commander, allowed Emperor Hirohito to remain on the chrysanthemum throne even after Japan's surrender. So much for unconditional surrender. You may already know that 7 of the 8 5-star generals in the United States and admirals, as Reverend said, including future President Dwight Eisenhower, all opposed the bombings. And if you didn't know, you'll hear more about that from at least one of the speakers tonight as well. You probably also know that atomic apologists claim that the nuclear war saved 1 million lives, both American and Japanese, they say, and what would have been a bloody invasion of Japan, whose people were taught from our school days would fight to the last man, woman, and child in defense of their homeland and their divine emperor. However, it's highly unlikely that an invasion of Japan would have been necessary at all. If there's one thing the Japanese feared more than an occupation by US capitalists, it was an occupation by Soviet communists. Once the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, which it did the day before Nagasaki, it was, as President Harry Truman said, and excuse me for the slur, but it was his words, not mine, "Finny Japs." Well, speaking of the Soviet Union, the US military, political, and scientific leaders, from Secretary of War Henry Stimson to Albert Einstein to many others, believed that the real purpose of the atomic bombings was to send a message to Moscow about who would be the undisputed master of the world in the post-war era. Of course, the Russians had different ideas. Although they didn't start the nuclear arms race, within 4 years, they were building and testing their own atomic bombs, and the rest, as they say, is history. Let's talk some more about history. Maybe history as it could have been. No, I'm not going to imagine that nuclear weapons were never invented, for our species will find the most horrific uses from the most wondrous technologies, because that's just how we roll. It's our nature, which is at once curious, intelligent, and cruel and suicidal. We may or may not have what it takes to make it through this century, let alone into the next phase of human evolution. I suspect that I'm not alone in imagining that some intergalactic confederation or something of the sort is out there deep in space somewhere issuing travel advisories about this little watery rock dominated by a strange species of talking apes. Roll up your windows and lock your doors when you fly by Earth. It's a dangerous neighborhood. I want you to imagine instead that things progress pretty much the way they did for the first decade or so of the Cold War. Now imagine this. One of the two nuclear superpowers reaching out to the other with an offer of mutual disarmament. Well, you don't have to imagine it because it actually happened several times in the late 1950s and early 1960s when the Soviet Union made such offers to the United States. Of course, they weren't altruistic offers. By that time, and despite fallacious fear-mongering about a non-existent missile gap in order to pad the pockets of the military-industrial complex and justify ballooning defense budgets, the US already enjoyed a significant advantage in both bomber-based nukes and its burgeoning arsenal of intercontinental ballistic missiles. No, I'm not a Russian stooge, although I have been accused of being one from my writing, but this isn't to say that the USSR did not play an equal role in nuclear brinkmanship, but the Russians were usually playing catch up to us. Let's be honest about that. Let's say that mutual disarmament didn't work. Now let's imagine that instead of tearing up the nuclear non-proliferation treaties, like the United States has been unilaterally doing at an alarming rate during the Trump administration, imagine it had worked to strengthen and expand them instead. I mean, if imperialist hawks like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan could sit down with their Soviet counterparts and hammer out historic deals like SALT, START, the INF and ABM treaties, surely someone so accommodating of Russia as Donald Trump could do it too. Instead, Trump wonders aloud why he can't wage nuclear war while threatening to do so against multiple nations. And again, he's not the first president to do this. I think they all pretty much have. It's not too late, although I wouldn't hold my breath, for a potential Biden administration to renounce, for example, the first strike nuclear doctrine that has been the core of America's deterrence strategy for more than half a century. But I doubt that's going to happen. I do want to stress that these aren't pie in the sky utopian dreams. These are simple decisions that could be made, they have been made, and could still be made, and the world could be different. This could be the difference between survival of our species and the extermination of all human life on Earth. That's something else I want you to imagine. Imagine things would have gone just a little bit differently in that fateful fall of 1962, and that a young Soviet submarine commander by the name of Vasily Arkhipov, we should all know his name, had not refused the commander's orders to launch nuclear torpedoes against the US Navy warship during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Many of you watching this who were alive then would have been killed, and many of us would have never been born. Now, humanity had dodged an existential bullet in 1962, but we did not learn our lesson, as subsequent disarmament overtures were rejected and the superpowers embarked on a period of massive nuclear arsenal expansion until there were more than 10,000 nukes in the world, more than enough to destroy it many times over, while numerous other countries developed their own nuclear weapons. And 62 wasn't the only close call. There were many such incidents throughout and after the Cold War. I'll never forget the fall of 1983, when we came close to World War III again, and it was when that horrific nuclear war film The Day After came out. I was 9 years old, and it instilled in me an eternal fear and loathing of nuclear weapons to this day. We avoided another untold catastrophe again in 1995 when the Soviet Union no longer existed, but a Norwegian scientific rocket launch was mistaken for an imminent incoming nuclear attack on Russia, whose president at the time, Boris Yeltsin, we all owe a debt of gratitude for not opening the nuclear launch briefcase that was placed in his hands that day. It doesn't take much stretch of the imagination to envision a nuclear war in a dangerous world in which 9 nations, all of which except interestingly North Korea, are currently fighting wars or military conflicts. Those 9 nations all have nuclear weapons. That's why the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has set its doomsday clock to 100 seconds before midnight, which is the closest that it has ever been to thermonuclear Armageddon. We're not out of these dangerous woods, not by a long shot, but we can be. If we would only stop electing leaders who lack the imagination to work for a world free of the scourge of nuclear weapons and the specter of species suicide. In the end, we get the policies and the actions we deserve, just like we get the pandemic we deserve, because we choose the leaders who choose them. We must choose better. I imagine we can, if only we want to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brett. Greatly appreciate it. You're right. We do need to choose better leaders if we want to avoid another nuclear catastrophe or another war in the Middle East. So we need to hold our politicians accountable. Our next speaker is a dear friend of mine, Janet Wheel. Janet was with Code Pink previously and SF 99% Coalition. That's where I met her. We organized the spaghetti dinner that we co-hosted jointly here in San Francisco, and she's been a lifetime activist and a teacher and the community leader. So I'm going to introduce Janet, and I got to give her control of the machine.
Okay. Am I able to share my screen, Vahid? I hope so.
Second.
Thank you, everyone, and just bear with us in our little technical glitch moment.
Live, and you're the host.
Thank you. This slideshow begins with a symbol of Japanese culture, the cherry blossom. This flower signifies the beauty and impermanence of life, but was also used as a symbol of imperial Japanese militarism during World War II. I offer this presentation in honor of the victims of atomic bombings, the hibakusha. This is a compound word, hi, which means to suffer, baku, which means explosion, and sha, which means person. This statue portrays Sadako Sasaki, a child hibakusha from Hiroshima. Suffering from leukemia as a result of her exposure to black rain, fallout, she folded almost 1,000 origami cranes, hoping for long life. Sadako died 2 days before her 13th birthday in 1955. Origami cranes, such as you see in the picture, have become symbols of remembrance and peace. Hiroshima and Kyoto were the only major Japanese cities that had not been firebombed by the US and Allied forces in World War II. While the people of Hiroshima prepared for firebombing, they hoped to escape this horror. As the Japanese proverb says, better than a banquet somewhere else is a good cup of tea and a bowl of rice at home. August 6, 1945. At 8:09 a.m. in a B-29 named Enola Gay, pilot Tibbets started the bomb run. His bombardier, Major Farabee, released the weapon from an altitude of 31,000 feet. The atom bomb Little Boy, containing over 100 pounds of uranium-235, detonated in the sky over Hiroshima. It exploded directly over Shima Surgical Clinic, the first ground zero. 70,000 to 80,000 persons, or perhaps more, were killed instantly in the blast and firestorm. Homes made from timber and paper turned into a sea of fire. Almost 4 square miles of the city was destroyed. The people died in agony. The atomic age had begun. City of 300,000, can we forget that silence? In that stillness, the powerful appeal of the white eye sockets of the wives and children who did not return home, that tore apart our hearts. Can it be forgotten? As has already been said, US generals made these statements after the atom bombs were dropped. They acknowledged, in some cases almost immediately, that there was no military rationale. The photo to the left is a photo of that fateful explosion in the air above Hiroshima. August 9, 1945. The horrors of Hiroshima were quickly followed by the bombing of Nagasaki. A B-29 plane dropped Fat Man, a plutonium implosion bomb. Up to 80,000 persons were killed immediately. As in Hiroshima, many thousands died soon afterward of burns, radiation sickness, and hunger. The US atom bombing of the mostly civilian populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki still stands as one of the most unethical uses of technology in human history for these reasons. While President Obama, during his visit to Hiroshima in 2016, gave his condolences for the suffering of the people, he never apologized. The United States government has never apologized to the Japanese people. Nuclear weapons have become symbols of political power and scientific/technical prowess. As has been mentioned, there are currently 9 nuclear nations: the United States, Russia, China, Britain, France, Israel, India, Pakistan, North Korea. 13,865 nuclear bombs exist worldwide. And again, as has been mentioned, the doomsday clock stands at 100 seconds to midnight. From before the bomb was tested, that is exploded, at Trinity Site in New Mexico or dropped on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, scientists and intellectuals have protested its use and sought to control and then end nuclear weapons. These are some of the many examples of that. Mothers in the US organized to stop above-ground nuclear testing in response to radioactive isotopes showing up in children's teeth. Popular resistance to nuclear weapons has been a decades-long international struggle still ongoing. Nuclear abolition is the goal. The nuclear threat and costs continue. Nuclear weapons continue to threaten humanity. As the initiator of the atomic age and the only country to use these terrible weapons in war, the United States bears heavy responsibility for this continuing threat to human survival. In 2017, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons won the Nobel Peace Prize. I will read words from Setsuko Thurlow's Nobel lecture. Forever eradicate the threat of nuclear annihilation. When I was a 13-year-old girl, trapped in the smoldering rubble, I kept pushing, moving toward the light. I repeat those words that I heard called to me in the ruins of Hiroshima. Don't give up. Keep pushing. See the light. Over 1 million people are living in Hiroshima now, and 7 billion of us on Earth are only home. We deserve to live free from nuclear terror. Never again. And in the words of the Japanese proverb, learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. Hopefully, we learned our lessons from these kinds of weapons and we don't repeat them in the future. Oh, I really appreciate what you had to say. Our next speaker is Erin Hunt from Minds Action Canada and Ban Killer Robots campaign. They are a sponsor of this event. Erin has been an activist since 2006, working on disarmament issues in Iraq and Yemen and Syria and elsewhere. And we're fortunate to have her with us this evening. So give me 1 second as I put on Erin. Sorry about that. You're on, Aaron.
Oh, thanks, Vahid, and thanks to the whole team at Ethics in Tech for the invitation to join you tonight. And thanks to all of you for letting me into your homes this evening. I'm really pleased to be speaking to you from Vancouver Island, Canada, on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people. As you heard, I'm the program manager at Minds Action Canada, and we're Canada's humanitarian disarmament campaign. So humanitarian disarmament essentially puts the focus on the human impact of weapons. So people are at the center of what we do. And as you've heard from other speakers, nuclear weapons take an unimaginable toll on people. For some context, that horrible explosion in Beirut this week was just a tiny fraction of the damage a nuclear weapon would cause. Today, the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, is an excellent time to reflect on the actions people have taken to promote nuclear disarmament and efforts that are currently being made to prevent future indiscriminate and inhumane weapons. Now, I have to admit, I was a little wary of combining a commemoration of Hiroshima with comedy, but I thought about all my interactions with survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and beyond the pain of their stories, what really has stood out to me is the laughter. Whether we were joking about who had the best negotiation snacks, conspiring to make Canadian politicians really uncomfortable about their lack of action on the issue, or having a few pints on Peace Boat when the translators wandered off. There's always been a lot of laughter. 75 years ago, Hiroshima was full of people with the same range of emotions that we have. And we cannot forget that the world was robbed of so much laughter, joy, and light when that bomb killed thousands of people in the blink of an eye. But we also can't ignore the laughter, joy, and light that fuels activism. So as Reverend Blake said, today is the chance to lament and to mourn those we're lost, but it's also an opportunity to embrace action fueled by laughter, compassion, and camaraderie. And taking action is exactly what we need to do. People around the world have been speaking out about nuclear weapons, as you've heard, for 75 years. But the past 7 years has seen a dramatic shift in the diplomatic level on nuclear disarmament. And a lot of that has been due to action from regular people like you and I. Between March 2013 and December 2014, over 100 states, along with international organizations and civil society, led by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, met 3 times to discuss the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons through a diplomatic process known as the Humanitarian Initiative. Shockingly, those meetings were actually the first time the international community had ever got together to talk about the humanitarian harm caused by nuclear weapons and our collective capacity to respond should a nuclear weapon be detonated again. Those meetings led to 2016's UN resolution to start negotiations on a treaty banning nuclear weapons, and it was passed by the UN General Assembly by a wide margin. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, usually referred to as by the acronym TPNW, was adopted in July 2017 and opened for signature in September of that year. It currently has 84 signatories, and as of today, 43 ratifications of the 50 states parties it needs for entry into force to make it international law. For our efforts to highlight the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons and our role in the negotiation of the TPNW, ICAN was awarded the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. Now, it hasn't been easy. Of course, there's been opposition. We know that some nuclear armed states, in particular the US and the UK, have been pressuring their allies, including Canada, to not attend negotiations, and regardless of their decades-old obligation under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT, where they had to disarm. Canada was actually invited to join an American-led press conference to express their objections to holding these negotiations, but Canada did not go. Side note, if you object to negotiations, holding a press conference in the UN and just outside the room the negotiations are being held in, it's a surefire way to ensure that these negotiations you wish weren't happening are front page news. So I really do need to get around to sending a thank you card to Ambassador Haley. Now, critics have said that the TPNW threatens global security and it won't eliminate any nuclear weapons. So let's look at those. First, there's no evidence that nuclear weapons actually keep us safe. For some reason, when we talk about nuclear weapons, the whole concept that correlation doesn't result in causation goes right out the door. But what we do know, as Brett alluded to, is that there's been dozens of near misses, including a flock of geese being mistaken for incoming missiles, bombs literally falling off planes, computer glitches, and a wrench being dropped in a missile silo, also, which resulted in the missile exploding. But luckily for everyone who lived in Arkansas in 1980, the warhead didn't explode. Now, for the assertion that the treaty will not eliminate any nuclear weapons, there's a pretty easy response. Well, of course not. Treaties aren't magic. We know that getting a treaty and even winning the Nobel Peace Prize is actually the easy part. The real work comes when you have to turn words into reality and strengthen the norm so that the idea of having or using nuclear weapons becomes unthinkable. We're doing the real work now, and in a few minutes, I'm going to share some ways that you can help. But first, I've also been asked to talk about killer robots. Now, these future weapons go by a bunch of names: fully autonomous weapons weapon systems, lethal autonomous weapon systems, but they all mean the same thing. Weapon systems that would be capable of selecting targets and using force, lethal or otherwise, without any human input or interaction. In 2013, Mines Action Canada and a number of other organizations founded the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots because we had a variety of legal, technical, security, moral, and ethical concerns about the possibility of these weapons. We're really pleased to have ethics and tech among our partners in this campaign. And one thing that makes this campaign really unique among humanitarian disarmament campaigns is the high number of roboticists, AI experts, engineers, computer scientists, and other academics taking part in the campaign. Within a year of launching the campaign, a UN disarmament treaty body called the Convention on Conventional Weapons, a prime example of why you don't let lawyers name things, took up the issue and has since been discussing lethal autonomous weapon systems. So I totally get that UN talks about killer robots sounds a little surreal. So let's talk a little bit about the issue before getting into the much promised what you can do. So autonomous weapons are problematic because there's no certainty they'd be able to follow existing international humanitarian law. So that's the laws of war. And the big thing there is you need to be able to distinguish between combatants who may be targeted and civilians who may not be. A robot couldn't be programmed to deal with every situation it might encounter on the battlefield. So if a robot unlawfully killed a civilian instead of a soldier, who would be responsible? According to Human Rights Watch, the programmers, manufacturers, and military commanders would all likely escape liability. Under criminal law, if a military commander used an autonomous weapon to intentionally kill civilians, they would be held accountable. But it'd be unfair and legally impossible to hold commanders accountable for situations in which the robot acted in an unpredictable way they couldn't foresee. It might be impossible to know why an autonomous weapon killed a civilian. It could have been spoofed, hacked, or damaged, or maybe it just simply implements its programming in an unexpected or weird way. Beyond the battlefield, autonomous weapons threaten rights and principles under other international law, fundamental as the right to life, the right to a remedy, and the principle of dignity. Under human rights law, which applies during peacetime as well as war, these weapons could be prone to killing people unlawfully because the weapons cannot be programmed to handle every situation, or they could be operating through biased tech. Autonomous weapons would also undermine human dignity because as inanimate machines, they couldn't understand or respect the value of life, yet they'd have the power to determine who lives and who dies. There's a lot of other moral and ethical concerns about autonomous weapons, which I'll leave for another event with ethics and tech. But all these moral and ethical concerns, they're often being voiced by scientists and engineers, and they really remind me of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto from 1955, which spoke of the dangers of nuclear weapons. The 11 signatories, which included 10 Nobel laureates, asked world leaders to remember your humanity and forget the rest. These words apply now more than ever as technology is advancing in new and concerning ways while we're seeing increased tension around the world. But even as the COVID-19 pandemic forces diplomacy online and provides ample distraction from these issues, ordinary citizens are proving that our organizational motto of ordinary people, extraordinary impact is very true. Ordinary people making the impossible possible is common in disarmament, and there's a pretty simple formula for how you can do it too. Okay, I've adapted this from my colleague Ray at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, who talks about how discontent, courage, and action resulted in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I love Ray, but I disagree with her slightly in that I believe it's conviction, courage, and to keep the alliteration, collective action. Discontent needs a conviction that a better world is possible to allow people to move forward and not be paralyzed by the enormity of a problem. So in each of these campaigns, we started out with some pretty simple convictions. Nuclear weapons threaten all of us, so they should be prohibited and eliminated. There should always be meaningful human control over the use of force. So autonomous weapons should be prohibited before they are ever developed or used. The campaigns develop these convictions through research, including hearing from survivors, listening to scientists, and including experts from affected communities. We use that information and a basic belief in human rights and the limits of war to build the convictions. Of course, having conviction means little unless you have the courage to stand up for it. And having strong convictions really does help you give the courage you need to challenge the status quo. We had to speak up against global superpowers who want to keep their weapons. We get told we're crazy, we'll never succeed, or worse. The states that want to keep their nuclear weapons are angry. States that want to build autonomous weapons are indignant. Diplomats supporting action on these issues are confronted and pressured not to make change, not to sign treaties, not to attend negotiations, or really do anything. When it comes to the nuclear ban treaty, proponents were told we were unrealistic, overly emotional, love that one, naive, while also being accused of undermining the NPT and dividing the international community. Now, that's of course, despite the fact that calling for a ban treaty is essentially implementing a key article of the NPT, Article 6, and that every meeting of the humanitarian initiative and the negotiations were open to all states. On autonomous weapons, we're being told we're just Luddites, forgetting all of the AI experts and computer scientists and tech workers that support the campaign. We're also told that we can't stop progress, it's premature to ban autonomous weapons, and that we need to be more realistic. Through all that, campaigners in some states have had the courage to say, no, these weapons are unacceptable. The survivors of nuclear weapons use and testing have demonstrated an astounding amount of additional courage, sharing their painful stories of loss and trauma again and again. But when you have courage and conviction, it's easy to take action. And one of the main focuses of our action has really been change the conversation. For too many decades, the global conversation about weapons was something for experts. And most of this time, the experts were men with security or military backgrounds. The rest of us and our opinions were something to be humored, maybe. But weapons were serious work for serious people and couldn't be tainted with humanity and emotion. Actually discussing what weapons do to people was considered a weakness. But talking about what weapons do to people is exactly how disarmament campaigns and the international community can break through diplomatic deadlock. More importantly, talking about the humanitarian impact of these abhorrent weapons allow us all to have a say. You don't need to understand nuclear fusion to realize that weapons that destroy cities and irradiate people and the environment are illegitimate. And you don't need a degree in computer science to find the idea of a machine choosing who lives or who dies on the battlefield or at the border abhorrent. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. This formula of courage, conviction, and collective action has been successful in other disarmament treaties before the TPNW, like the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines and the Convention on Cluster Munitions, both of which Mines Action Canada is very involved with. And we know it will help us prevent autonomous weapons from ever being used. But everyone does have a role to play in these efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons and ban killer robots. On nuclear weapons, ICANN has a city appeal where you can get your city to pledge to support the treaty, even if your national government won't. And if you check out don'tbankonthebomb.com, you can find out if your bank is investing money, your money, in nuclear weapons producers. You can speak out. Faith leaders have been crucially important for both campaigns, as have military veterans, and then on killer robots, tech workers speaking out both their companies and at the political and policy level have made real change because they don't have rose-colored glasses about what the tech can do. Even just helping ethics and tech get the word out in your own community would be a huge help. Plus, I'm guessing most of this audience is American, and you have an election year this year. So that means you're probably going to be hearing from a lot of campaigns that want your vote. When they call, tell them you want to see nuclear disarmament and you want a ban on killer robots. Ordinary people speaking up can have an extraordinary impact. Now, you've heard from Janet some words from my fellow campaigner, Setsuko Thurlow, who 75 years ago was a 13-year-old trying to free herself from the burning wreckage of a building in Hiroshima. As Janet had on her slide, she shares her story of how a man touched her shoulder and told her, "Don't give up, keep pushing. I'm trying to free you, see the light coming through that opening. Crawl to it as quickly as you can." She made it to the light that day in 1945, and since then it's been speaking out for nuclear disarmament in memory of her classmates and family members who did not. As you heard, in December 2017, she delivered half of the Nobel Peace Prize lecture on behalf of ICANN. She called the TPNW a new light to guide us all and implore us to follow each other out of the dark night of nuclear terror. No matter what obstacles we face, we will keep moving and keep pushing and keep sharing this light with others. So I do know that things are very dark right now, but I hope that you'll take Setsuko's words to heart and be inspired to find a way to be a light on these issues. It is possible to build a world without nuclear weapons and to prevent autonomous weapons from ever being used. We just need you to remember your humanity and speak up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. Greatly appreciate. Aaron, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Aaron, for that this talk and all the support from the campaign to stop killer robots for ethics and tech to be able to organize this event. You're a true activist and you inspire us, and we're glad that you participated today, Aaron. So thank you, and please. Please give my regards to Mary and the rest of the team at the campaign for being so diligent and working with us. Our next speaker is Cindy Cohen. Cindy is the Executive Director of Electronic Frontier Foundation. We are a member of Electronic Frontier Alliance, which is a network organization of nonprofits and civil action organizations that are concerned about their civil liberties. We get a lot of support from Nash and Lewis and the rest of the team, so I definitely want to call them out. But I wanted to introduce Cindy. She's been an activist and an attorney for the past 30 years. I want to congratulate her on the 30th anniversary of EFF. It's a huge, huge accomplishment, and you've been involved with it since the very early beginning. So congratulations, Cindy. I think you're still muted. If you don't mind unmuting yourself.
Happy to.
Great.
Great.
You have the stage.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me on this this important anniversary. I'm just taken aback by Janet and Aaron and Brett's presentations. I'm here to talk about something a little different, but I think there are good connections between the conversation that we should have had about and should still have about nuclear weapons and the conversations we need to have about other technologies right now. Hiroshima is a strong example of how technology can be used for bad, horror. Whether you're talking about nuclear weapons or killer robots, technology takes the ability of humanity to be horrible to each other and increases it in a tremendous way. We also know that technology can be used for good. And whether that's the moments we have right now where we're watching in real time the protests for the Black Lives Matter movement because people have cameras on their phones and the ability to upload video, or the efforts that we see out halfway around the world in Hong Kong to try to stand up for human rights there as well. The world isn't just about tech good or tech bad. It's all about what we do with the technology, and that puts the responsibility back on us. And implementing human rights require us to navigate that and to have to deal at a level of complexity that's a little, that can be very, very difficult and challenging. You know, today, the things that we're seeing with technology being dangerous are the killer robots, which Aaron talked about. So I'm not going to talk about too much, but I do want to talk a little bit about the underlying machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies underneath them, since I know a little bit about those as well, to try to explain why the concern about killer robots and autonomous weapons is so great. And as Aaron points out, being carried so much by scientists themselves. But I also want to talk about surveillance, because I think that one of the ways that we see technology being deployed against people in violation of their human rights right now is the use of surveillance. It's the automated license plate readers and the facial recognition technologies, and the government corporate partnerships like the Ring one, putting surveillance in everybody's home doorstep. That are creating the situations in which it's very, very difficult for us to actually maintain a democracy. When the government, the people in power, know everything about the people who are not in power, it makes it extremely difficult to engage in self-determination, to engage in democratic systems. And unfortunately, we have slowly built, sometimes for commercial purposes, but it doesn't really matter, the information's available to the government, a surveillance world that is very, very tough right now. That's why we cheer when we see the protesters in Hong Kong taking out the cameras that are ubiquitous in Hong Kong. That's why in Ukraine, when everyone who attended a protest against the Russians received a text message saying, "We know you were at the protest," it sent a chill down everyone's spine, both in the Ukraine and around the world. And of course, in the United States, the surveillance that we're seeing in response to the activism on the streets is very concerning. So I think that it's important for all of the people who've spoken here tonight but I think all of you listening, to think about where you want to sit in this story, because you can either be part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem. It's not really a lot of space to be neutral at this particular point. So, and it was the realization that technology could be used for good or for evil that led to the founding of EFF. As my colleague Cory Doctorow has noted, you don't found an Electronic Frontier Foundation if you think everything is going to be magically great as a result of digital technology. We've seen from the 30 years, as thank you for the shout out, the 30 years that this organization has been around, we've seen censorship, corporate and government surveillance, and efforts to lock down and control information and innovators present from the very beginning. EFF was not founded on the naive belief that coming change would create a digital utopia. EFF took root because even from those early days, it was clear that powerful new digital tools could be used to hurt as well as to heal. EFF then was created to make sure that technology supports freedom, justice, and innovation for all the people of the world. And while there's a lot of darkness in the world right now, and certainly darkness in remembering what happened in Hiroshima, I think that we should remind ourselves that we win sometimes. We've accomplished a lot in the 30 years that EFF has been working to try to make the digital world work for you instead of against you. Along with cheering, of course, with the awarding of the Nobel Prize and the fine work that Erin and her group do. We've won some things in the digital world too, and I think it's important to remind ourselves of that because it can feel overwhelming and it can make people feel powerless. But we've stood up against bullies over and over again, and we've stood up to empower the users of technologies. We help secure, we all work together and help secure the protection of encryption technology. Now it's under threat right now, but encryption is the way that you have a private conversation in the digital age. And it was not at all open for us to use when EFF was founded 30 years ago, but we were able, through a multi-pronged strategy involving litigation that I was lucky enough to be involved in, along with congressional work and public pressure and public conversation, to free up encryption from government control. We established that code is speech, setting a very, very high bar for government regulations. Of course, that bar can be met, and it certainly can be met when human rights are at stake. But it allows people to maintain the control of the tools that they all rely on. We've built tools to help protect protesters. We've helped guides to help protesters understand how to protect themselves. We built tools to help make your browsing safer, and protected security researchers and tinkerers all across the world who better protect all of us. We've shamed and we've sued and we've pushed companies to stand with their users instead of spying on them, censoring them, and mistreating them. And we've investigated and exposed and worked to undermine the ugly underbelly of the surveillance business model. We've forced governments to provide information to us so that we're better prepared to turn around and grab control over surveillance. And we've stopped cold so many bad ideas in courts and legislatures that we really honestly have lost count. But I think it's important to remember that we have this power. We can grab a hold of things. We are not at the mercy of technology. We're not at the mercy of technologists. We're not at the mercy of the governments or the corporations who do this. And we do win. Now, the fights don't necessarily go away. Everything is a long-term battle. We still have big work to do. We've made sure that the Fourth Amendment protects your emails. We've made sure that the Fourth Amendment protects a lot of what you do online, but we still need to do much, much more. We've made sure that the Fourth Amendment begins to protect your location privacy, but we still have much work to do, and especially work when it comes to national security as an excuse for surveillance, and the long work that I and others have done to try to make sure that the NSA isn't sitting on the government backbone watching all of our traffic as it goes by. We still see police searching and seizing way too much, and having access to sophisticated tools. We're seeing police and private entities roll out facial recognition, which is an issue that I think all the people who are watching this ought to pay attention to. This is a technology that is extremely dangerous in a democracy in the hands of the government, because the one thing you cannot change very easily is your face. So the positive identification of people who are involved in political change, whether it's standing up against nuclear or Holocaust or fighting for human rights in places all around the world, facial recognition is just too dangerous. It's one of the few technologies that EFF has supported the banning of for government use. And of course, our fights to protect encryption go on. Every couple of years, the Department of Justice comes up with a new excuse for why they need to ban encryption or limit it or backdoor it. And every year, every time we bat them back down again, but it does feel a little like a whack-a-mole game. They show up again with a new excuse. So these are the kinds of things that we need to take control of, that we can take control of. We can work to build tools that are secure. We can work to not backdoor them. We can stand together to make sure people understand how to use these tools to protect themselves. Right now, there's a Supreme Court case that folks who are interested in this should be watching. It's called Van Buren. It's in front of the US Supreme Court, and it's about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is one of the laws that gets used against people who try to do security research. And we're hopeful that we're going to take a bite out of that as well, just like we did on location privacy. So those are some of the victories that we've had and some of the fights that we're having right now. As the internet has grown, so have the issues that we've needed to address to build a future where technology supports justice, freedom, and innovation. And the biggest one, I think, right now is recognizing that technology that technology can't cure racism, and putting sophisticated technology on top of a racist society will double down on the racism. And this leads me to talking a little bit about machine learning and AI, and why it's as dangerous in police activities as it is in autonomous weapons. Machine learning can do really incredible things, but it's only as good as the data you give it, and it's only as good as the inferences you ask it to make and train. And when it comes to deciding whether somebody's a combatant or a non-combatant, that's not something where there's a ground truth that you can train an AI on to the level where it's going to always be successful, and the consequences can be tremendous. In general, the way we think about machine learning at EFF and AI, they call it artificial intelligence. I think that there's still a ways to go before what we're seeing rolled out under the mantle of artificial intelligence actually is artificial intelligence. Most of it is machine learning and statistics. So forgive me my grumpy old lady insistence on the right terminology. But machine learning tools can be very, very helpful when you know what the ground truth is and you're just trying to pick a pattern out of a mess of data. But those are a very limited set of problems. And it's tremendously important when we're thinking about machine learning systems. We think about who bears the consequences if they're wrong. And if the people who bear the consequences if they're wrong are not the people who are in control of and deciding to use the technology, that's when we should stop. So if government wants to look at its own, EFF is handling a case right now where we're trying to get information about the parole boards and whether the parole boards are racist in their decisions about who gets parole. That's a great use for machine learning because we're trying to feed in the data about what government is actually doing so we can pull out the patterns and what government's actually doing and help government learn how it's doing. That's very different than using those same systems to try to decide who a person is or whether a person is likely to be a combatant or likely to be a criminal, or likely to become up in a bad person in one way or another, maybe not a good candidate for a job. So I think it's important that we recognize that that machine learning and AI needs to have a complicated rubric for when we use it and when we don't use it. And we are nowhere near that rubric right now. That's why we were pretty happy to see a hold put on facial recognition by several major companies in the last couple of months, but a hold is not enough. We have to put systems in place. This is the thing we didn't do with atomic weapons. We didn't put a system in place to decide when and how sophisticated technologies could be used in war before they were used. And it put us behind the 8 ball in trying to decide to try to do some control. Now we've done, I think, heroic work trying to build controls from that start, but we cannot do the same thing with facial recognition. It's much, much later. We're much more sophisticated in our thinking, and we ought to be, and we ought to put it for good use. I think that right now, when we started with the internet, we had this idea that maybe we were going to be able to get to a blank slate, that we were going to be able to be free of some of the controls that existed in the offline world. I think it's fair to say that while we've done some good things there, we still have a long way to go. And I think the most important issue that we've seen is that the technical tools of government and corporate surveillance and censorship that we fight against are not applied equally. They are disproportionately aimed at and impact people of color in our society, especially in these times when technology is both helping us hold the powerful accountable and being used by governments. We recognize that Black Lives Matter, and we pledge to redouble our efforts to beat back police surveillance and abuse and to build and protect the tools that allow you to organize, assemble, and speak securely and without censorship. Whether it's Cisco helping build the Great Firewall of China that helps the Chinese government identify religious minorities, or the US government tapping into the backbone of the internet, or the tech giants who leverage their surveillance to track our every move, we need to seize the reins of power again. We've done it in the past, and we can do it again. EFF, as I said, turned 30 this year. We picked a lighthouse for the central image of our year-long celebration. You can see it behind me right now. I'm pointing the right way. My friend Sigmund, the sea monster here too, is also with us. And we did that because we are hopeful right now that while we're living in a time of turbulent and dark waters, our values and the work that we've done to try to help empower to help build a movement and empower that movement to take control of our technological future could mean that we have a better future than the one that we had than the times that led to the horrible Hiroshima bombing. So thank you so much for inviting me to this, and I'm, very, very grateful to get to talk to you tonight.
About that, we had a little audio issue. There are sometimes technical glitches on our end. This was a quick one and we solved it. Next, we're going to play a short video by our dear friend Will Durst. He's still in the hospital recovering, but we're going to move over to the comedy section of the night, and we're going to have a short video by Will, and then followed by Debbie Durst giving the introductions to the comedians. So with that said, if you want to start the video.
Hey guys, Will Durst here with a few choice words about a group, a wonderful group doing some great work, and they're called ethicsintech.com. And I know what you're saying, ethics in tech, wow, that sounds like an oxymoron. That's like saying vegetarian butcher or kosher pork tartare or Catholic condom supply house or George W. Bush think tank or Donald Trump guide to etiquette and manners. And you're right. But they're here to help, and they do with a smile. Every event that you go to will have a comedy component, along with expert speakers and panel discussions and audience community participation. So come on down, check out ethicsintech.com, and you can see past events, and you can read the blog, and you can see about upcoming events. So ethicsintech.com. It's simple, and you might want to consider volunteering or, throwing them a couple of bucks here and there. Any and or all donations will be accepted and appreciated. Ethics in tech. It doesn't have to be an oxymoron.
To be live. You're driving down the street in some shady part of town and they say live nude girls because it's like, oh, you wouldn't want to see them any other way, I guess. Welcome. Hello. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Wonderful presentations. I have learned so much tonight that I did not know before, and I hope you all did too. And it's all very heavy, heady stuff, but now we're going to have a little lightness, a little light in the darkness, as you will. You need to laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. And we've got some people tonight I think you're really going to enjoy. This first comedian is fabulous. His name is Alvin Lee. He's a local San Francisco comedian who used to work in tech and politics. Ready to throw it all away for comedy? What the heck? Go for it. You only go around once, kid. He's very excited to be your opening comedian tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alvin Lee.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much. Debbie, you know how much I love you. You and Will Durst are legends, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Ethics and Tech, Vahid, and Brett, thank you so much for inviting me over tonight. I'm really honored to be here. Everyone else, thank you so much for the standing ovation. You may now all take a seat in your rooms. I just want to start off by addressing the question that I know is on everyone's mind right now, and that question is, what question does this guy think is on my mind right now? No, the question is, where do I know Alvin from? Why does the name sound so familiar? And I want to say it's because some of you might recognize me from Netflix. I did do a college internship there, and I answered emails. So back in 2013, if you got locked out of your account and you couldn't, get to watching the videos you want to watch, and you reached out to Netflix, and someone named Alvin responded and told you to clear your browser history, that was probably me. So we did it. We made it here. So really good to be here. Let's see. It's been a fun, amazing year, right? I think we can all agree that 2020 has just been a blast. We're all just enjoying ourselves, having the best time, just frolicking out in the woods with our cute masks on. Is that right? Everyone agrees that's 2020 is the best time. No. No, we're all gonna die. I'm sorry to say that, but this might be everyone's last show. This is the worst year ever. I went outside earlier today and I saw, one of those like sad, daily lonely walks that we all take nowadays. And I saw a family of 5, 2 parents, they both had their masks on. And then I saw 3 of their kids, but out of the 3 kids, only 2 of the kids had their masks on. So I think they only had 4 masks and the parents had to make a hard decision. It was like, this one's not our favorite. We just have to let this one go. If one of them gets COVID, it's Billy. Billy has ADHD and his grades aren't so good. So it's like Sophie's choice in 2020. A little about me, because I know you all want to learn more about me. I do identify as queer. And for once, I want to hear a loud gasp when I say that, but this is a Zoom show and I can't hear the audience anyways. But I do try hard to be straight passing a little bit because I know my dad wants me to, but it doesn't work. Everyone knows I'm queer right away. I am also non-binary though, so my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm one of those people, and for that reason, my parents do love my siblings more. It's okay. No, I'm just kidding. My parents do love me. They didn't spank me as a child unless it was consensual, and sometimes it was. I did find it thrilling back then, and I still do. So if anyone, is into that stuff, you have my email. It's on the program. Reach out to me. Obviously, I'm Asian. My parents are Asian, but I did have a white nanny growing up. Which is to say, that's why I'm so confident, right? She raised me and my siblings as her own, which means she told us you can all become presidents, you can all tell jokes on Zoom and people will laugh, and you can all talk to managers whenever you want. It's your God-given right. I was raised white by my white nanny, but I am still a bad driver though. That's something a nanny can't fix. It's in my blood. I hate to play into the bad Asian driver stereotype, but it's true for me. I found out the hard way that there's actually a limit to the number of accidents you can have before the state of California goes, nope, no more. Apparently you can only crash other cars a few times a year, once or twice, it's fine, insurance will pay for it. But after 5 to 6 times a year, they say enough, it's your license is revoked. And I want to say in my defense, though, I never actually hit a pedestrian before. I did hit a pedestrian's shopping cart once when they were pushing it, and the shopping cart did, fly across the parking lot. But the person was fine. He wasn't hurt. He was just traumatized. So whatever, it doesn't count. I want to talk about my last accident, though. The last accident I had was when I hit a bus. So and that was the last accident that got my license revoked. So I was driving to work from home and I accidentally ran a red light and I ran into a moving bus full of people that were going to work. And so everyone came out of the bus and they're all giving me the side eye because they're upset. They're all going to be late to work. They're all going to be in trouble. And I had to apologize to everybody individually. So there were like 30 people on the bus. I was like, I'm so sorry. I've been driving for hours and hours today and I just got really tired. But the truth is I've only, made it like maybe 2 blocks away from my house. And so that was a lie. Didn't even make it past the freeway. And I called my mom because my car was totaled and it was gonna get towed. And I told my mom to sort of come and pick me up. And what my mom did was unforgivable. She woke up my dad and my 5 siblings and she walked to the scene of the accident like it was some sort of family excursion. And when she got there, I screamed at her. I was like, how can you humiliate me like that? I'm your child, all right? You should have just gotten into your car by yourself, waited in the car for maybe 10 minutes, just sit there for 10 minutes, drive around the blocks a few times, and then come get me. Now, everyone here on the bus knows that I live 2 minutes away, that I couldn't even get past, I couldn't even get past 2 blocks from my house before hitting another car. How can you humiliate me like that? And now I'm just judged. I'm judged by everyone here. And she told me, Alvin, you almost killed all these people. They're already judging you. And so anyways, we walked home and she spanked me. So it was good. I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Sorry, Vahid's telling me something. Oh, I'm almost out of time. Okay, let me just wrap up real quick then. So I'll end with a, let's skip that bipolar joke. I'll do a last quick tech joke since this is like a ethics and tech. So I did used to work at a Bitcoin company. You all know what Bitcoin is, right? Yeah, I'll say that I don't know what Bitcoin is. It's unclear to me. I worked there for 3 years and I have no idea what it is. And one day I showed up to work at noon because, tech jobs aren't real and you can just show up at noon. And actually noon was really early for me because my coworker saw me and offered me coffee when I got in because she's never saw me that early before. And so the office was in disarray. People were running around and saying, oh my God, Bitcoin crashed, Bitcoin crashed. And I was like, oh, okay. So Bitcoin is also a bad driver. I don't work there anymore. They fired me. I tell jokes now on Zoom. That's all for me. Thanks for having fun with me. My name is Alvin. God bless America. Let's hear it for Debbie.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you. You've got a future. You can already make fun of yourself in front of other people. So you've got a huge future in comedy ahead of you. This next comedian, ladies and gentlemen, she's a comedian and a journalist. You've seen her on MSNBC's Red, White, and Who and National Geographic's Explorer. She's currently the host of Newsbroke on AJ Plus and the Bituation Room podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous Francesca Fiorentini.
What's going on, everybody? How's things? Hi, Debbie. So good to see you. It's good to be here. This is my second or third Ethics in Tech event, and at this point, I am so good at just bringing us up from the depths of the depression. Like I should really do my act now for like the suicide hotline, like, at funeral wakes, just like at the buffet line. Like Vahid has really helped train me. Like, oh, you want to bring back an audience from a discussion about killer robots and how we're all being spied on straight up like Enemy of the State style? Hey, you get Francesca. What's up? If you guys hear an echo, I am streaming to you from my empty apartment. That is the sound of the inside of my landlord's heart. No, I'm not getting evicted. I'm self-evicting. I'm leaving because, if we have to stay at home, got to be a nicer home. Still don't have a dishwasher, but that's okay. I get one day. But this is it. This is the last show I'm doing in this house. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be a good show. I don't know if anyone's drinking tonight after all that talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anyone? No? Okay. Cool. Just me. Yeah. Okay. Debbie's drinking. I think it'll be weird when all this is over to go back drinking with other people. You know, they say like, you're not supposed to drink alone. Don't drink alone. That's when you know you have a problem. Like if all this is over and we can go hug people again and you still need a drink, that's when you know you've got a problem. Like that's it. That's unhealthy. It'll be like, wow, you need AA. Oh my God. For now, fucking bottoms up. Oh, I swore. I was told we're obviously anti-H bombs, anti-A bombs, and we're maybe anti-F bombs. I don't know. Guys, let me know. Sound off on the comments, I guess. I'm supposed to keep it clean. I'm sheltering in place, obviously. I don't have kids, and I know people who have kids are realizing how shitty they are. And, terrible they are. And look, yes, we should pay teachers more. And no, you shouldn't send them back to school, right? I know Trump and the Department of Education, they want to send all the kids back to school. It's like part of a new initiative called No Child Left. I don't think you should. Stay at home with them. Keep them at home. It's fine. They can probably eat that Lego, whatever. It'll come out the other side. No, I'm really glad I don't have kids right now. Like, I've been on the fence, I think my feelings about a baby are kind of like my feelings about an Apple Watch. Like I don't particularly want one. I definitely don't need one, right? But I guess if someone happened to give me one, I'd regift it to my mom. She wants one so bad. Oh God, does she ever? Doesn't know how to use it. She wants one. I don't know if I can handle a baby. I don't know if the planet can handle a baby, to be quite frank. Like every time I think about having a family, just like a little voice, like a little Greta Thunberg, pops up into my head, just like, how dare you? You can't even start a budget and you want to start a family. You can't even keep an air plant alive. All they need is air. It's actually a lot more difficult than that. You Googled. Anyway, it goes on from there. These are hard times, y'all. A lot of people are mad at the president. They say that the president is a piece of shit. I'm sorry, Debbie. He's a piece of shit. People say he's a piece of shit. And is that fair? Like, honestly, let's think about that. Is that actually fair to the president? I don't think he's a piece of shit. I think he is a work of shit. Okay? Credit where credit is due. You got to stand all the way back to appreciate the intricacies of shit. He's like the shit-stained chapel. It's like if Gaudi were, actually made of poo-poo. It already looks a little bit like poo. We're talking about nuclear weapons and how ridiculous they are. I've been cleaning out my apartment. So I just threw out some old cottage cheese and I was like, dude, this is like the nuclear arsenal. It's like moldy. We don't know what to do with it. We need to throw it the F out. But do you guys know that this president, just like every president, is followed around by a U.S. Marshal who has a suitcase that is called the nuclear football. Wherever he goes, this U.S. Marshal goes also. And this U.S. Marshal actually happens to be African-American, which means he's the only black man with a football that the president respects. There's something, right? It's like progress. But I think it's good. Like, we're talking about racism for the first time. We're finally like, ooh, America, we're doing it. Like, it didn't take a president who was 50% white. It took a president who's 150% white. And if you're keeping track, it's too white. It's too white. We have to refight the civil rights movement right now. That's what we're doing, refighting it. And it kind of makes you realize that maybe we're devolving just as a species overall. One day we're going to wake up, we won't be able to scroll because our opposable thumb is going to be gone. We have to fight all these fights that we fought before. pretty soon we're gonna have to take to the streets with signs that are just like gravity matters, with like Sir Isaac Newton and an apple, like, oh yeah. And then of course someone else will have another sign that's just like all matter matters. And that's when we will reverse Big Bang into bacteria, y'all. We have a lot to look forward to. It could, look, guys, I don't even want to say how bad can it get, because every time I feel like I've said that, every time I'm like throwing the tarots and like talking to the crystals, I'm like, just let it not get worse. There's a pandemic. Anyway, I'm a news junkie. I love news. I do the news. I read, I watch, I listen to all kinds of things, different podcasts and television shows, except for one outlet that I refuse to listen to. And I think you guys all know which one I'm talking about. Super offensive. NPR. That's right. Don't clutch your tote bags all at once. All right. I'd see you. No, let me just say this. F NPR. Okay. I hate NPR. That's right. You heard me. Why? Because at a time when like nothing is chill. Do you ever feel like NPR reporters are just way too chill? You know, like it doesn't matter what's going on in the country. 150,000 people are dead from a killer virus that there's no vaccine for. Continents are on fire. Nazis are back. NPR reporters always sound like they're in a spa and a chalet in Aspen. Good evening. I'm Kai Rizdal. President Trump is actively encouraging his supporters to spread the coronavirus, and I have a hot towel around my scrotum. Why are you happy? Or like, good evening. I'm Windsor Johnston. Hundreds of migrant children will never be reunited with their families, and tiny fish are eating the dead skin off my toes. What the? Like, they read the news like my dad reads an LL Bean catalog. It doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? I hate it. It's offensive. And they always have weird names. It's always like, for NPR, I'm Penelope Spaghetti Meatball. Like, what the? Is that hyphenated? Like, what? Right? It's not ethnic. It's not about ethnic names. I'm talking about white people weird, all right? Kai Rizdal, Windsor Johnston. I got a list. Scott Horsley. I heard that fool today. I didn't because Cherry Glazer. That's a real name. Sandon Totten. Nell Greenfield Boyce. Dina Temple Raston. These are all names of people who grew up in a household with 3 parents, Like they ate chickpea flour till they were 18. They had pizza for the first time. They're like, ooh. Mandalit Del Barco. That's not a name. That is the safe word of a librarian. Okay, just Mandalit Del Barco. Hope I didn't lose all y'all on that. Let me go over my jokes. Guys, I think that's it for me, but I'm so, so happy to always do this show. Thank you, Vahid. Thank you to Debbie. Love to Will. I loved seeing him, and love to all of you for doing this incredible work. Moment of sincerity. And thank you for giving me almost pretty much the hardest job in comedy.
Jessica, you do a wonderful job. Thank you so much. I always enjoyed your comedy and your sense of humor, and it's great to have you at our events. And I think you've been at least to 3 to 4 of them. So yeah, you're definitely a frequent flyer when it comes to ethics and tech.
Oh, dude, I hope I'm like platinum level at this point.
Yeah.
Something. Thanks, Vahid. You take care.
Thank you. You too.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Francesca. You're the best ever. You're so funny. We need more funny women. More funny women. This next man, this marvelous man, ladies and gentlemen, I've known him forever. He's got an award-seeking podcast called The Smartest Man in the World, because he is. You've seen him on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen him before. Here he is now. Boys and girls of all ages, Mr. Greg Proops.
Hello, everybody. Hey, what if everybody unmuted their mic and I could hear you laugh? Because I've been watching it for a while, and it's like watching a comedy show in an aquarium from the fish's point of view. There you are. Now I can hear you. What happened to the woman who was on her phone? There's Cindy. If you unmute, then I can hear you laugh. And then it'll be more like we're having a comedy experience and less like I'm giving a lecture to a bunch of intellectuals who I can't measure up to. And so therefore I resort to the only thing I have left, which is cheap shots and defensiveness. So nice to be here. I have been so busy this week. I've just had enough time tonight to drop by. So thanks for having me. It's been an amazing evening. As Francesca said, there's nothing really like following Hiroshima with comedy. It's smooth sailing. Fortunately for you, I've done more corporate gigs where they've had dead people announcements before they brought you on than any other human alive. Well, we're sad here at the winery to miss Jim this year. He passed away. Anyway, Merry Christmas now. Let's have Greg Proops. I'm excited to be here. I live in an art gallery now. You may have noticed. I'm originally from San Carlos, California, the whitest place on the face of the earth. Home of the Plain Yogurt Festival. Take the fruit out. The powerful taste is burning our tongues. San Carlos was so white, One Direction was found in the hip-hop section. San Carlos is so white that our Catholic school was called St. Charles. I'll wait. St. Charles means San Carlos, y'all. That's how white it was. The town fathers are like, well, San Carlos, that sort of sounds Mexican, doesn't it? Maybe we should call it St. Charles so everyone feels more comfortable. I'm all for diversity unless it includes white people. Because white people have brought us to this moment and they've got a lot to answer for. So I no longer want to play in white people's reindeer games. I return my white card. But Greg, you're from San Carlos, the whitest place on earth. I know. I no longer embrace the things that white people embrace. I eschew them and, in fact, decry them. Things like, I don't know, hockey, the Academy Awards, the Senate, Boston, the group and the city, Kansas, the state and the group, Bernie Sanders. White people love Bernie Sanders. I'm so glad he's going to go away. I know some of you are tech people, so you're like, hey, we need, rainbows that ride unicorns on a butterscotch field till the butterfly whispers a secret to us and then everything's revealed and we live in fudge land till the end of our lives and never have to work a day. Bernie, it was Jill Stein that was the one that really got me. I wish I had been a Jill Stein voter. It's like being a Marianne Williamson voter. I'd have so much a nicer house than I have now. You know what I mean? And one of those split level places with like a heated driveway and the kitchen with the islands in it and the copper pots hanging down. And Greg, could you smoke dope outside? Our rescue dog Cobain has asthma. So I come from San Carlos, like I said, but I moved to San Francisco, and that's where I met Debbie in 1943. And she was shipping out with the merchant marines to a small island called Mindanao, where her people came from. And we only had a couple of weekends in Alameda together at that point, but it has been a long time. And when you tell people you're from San Francisco, well, there's two things you know when you're from San Francisco. One, everything. And two, that no matter where you go, where you're from is cooler. Because people try it on you. They're like, oh, don't you love New York? And you're from San Francisco, you're like, crowded. And the smell, I'm certain at certain times of year in New York, they bring in urine from other cities. But there is nothing like watching a rat the size of a standard-bred poodle ascend a K2 of garbage right before you go in for lunch. That's one of the things that makes New York so scintillating. But we call it the city, and that's how parochial we are. I know people in New York call New York the city, but San Franciscans call the city no matter where they are. You could be in France, Missouri, and you go, oh, I'm from the city. And people are like, the city? Which city? You're like, hello, ding, ding. Crabs, cable cars, homosexuals everywhere, Black Mirror, all the shit you hate, all the shit that makes you stay up at night because it makes you feel shitty about what a narrow-minded... that city. That's the one I mean. And then it's tech bro adjacent. Now there's no more having to take the Google bus. The Google bus will no longer have bricks thrown at it anymore. I don't think anyone can take the Google bus, can they? Isn't it parked in the Google parking lot so everyone can be a wage slave from their station at home now, and they can actually get more hours out of you than they did before? And everybody goes, yes, Greg. Thanks for pointing out the worst part of the pandemic to us. I love when I hear people's houses. It's great. Sometimes you hear people's cats, and you're like, are you torturing an animal while the show is on? Here we are at this juncture, as I say, and we've got a situation on our hands. I think the only way to get through it, is to live in denial. Every time I see a middle-aged man at the grocery store not wearing a mask or wearing the nose mask, which is the worst mask of all. Yeah, how you doing? And you're like, I'm not like a epidemiologist or anything like that, but my understanding of the droplet phenomenon is that any orifice on your head, save your ears, is a danger to mankind. This one's my other favorite one, the Mennonite. Oh, and how are you today, brother? I have come to the grocery store to bunk your high. The other day I was at the nursery, where they sell plants. And until this pandemic happened, I really hadn't gone outside that much. And now I realize there's butterflies and squirrels and stuff out there, and they're dangerous. The squirrel at my house throws branches at me and nuts and stuff. I was like, and I know why. It's because I'm home all the time now. I was never a factor in that squirrel's life until the pandemic. Now the squirrel's like, really, every day? And I had a point that I was heading toward here, but I seem to have knocked one of my earpieces out. There we go. The inability to wear masks properly is one of the most trepidatious factors in going out in our trying time. I'm going to have to ban a couple of phrases after this is over in 4 years. That was a joke. These trying times, we're all in this together. I think we've proven so far, hell no, we're not all in this together. There's us, and then there's a bunch of rich people, and then there's a bunch of other people who are worse off than us. That's how it's going down. If we were all in it together, Jeff Bezos would be droning weed to my house right now, and we'd all be on like a kayak. Mark Zuckerberg would be driving down the street with like one of those t-shirt bazookas shooting wads of 50s at everyone in order that we don't hang him during the next pandemic when we can finally get to him and it's not just virtual. I don't know how much time we're supposed to do here, Debbie. I've got some hilarious 45 jokes, and then we'll here's a story that maybe not this story. It's a story about Debbie and Will and me, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I know you'll reach out with your feelings. Debbie and Will and I were playing golf some time ago in the 90s, and we were at a beautiful golf course in San Francisco, in the city, and we're on one hole, and there's a foursome of white guys behind us, and they drive a ball right onto the green where we're standing, and the ball drops right in between me and Debbie goes, "Hey!" And Will goes, "I'll handle this." And he walks down to these guys who've just teed off, and we see them in close conference, and Will gesticulating and gesturing and pointing back toward us, and then heads nodding in concordance. And he walks all the way back, and we go, "What did you say?" And he goes, "I told him that Debbie was in the quarterfinals of the state championships, and she got hit in the head with a ball, and she's been a little gun shy ever since." These guys drove by, and I said they could play through. These guys drove by and they went, "Hi." "Hi," like that to Debbie. And Debbie went, "Ah!" That one always made me filled with joy. In finality, let's see here. This time of year, I would usually be at the Edinburgh Festival, and Edinburgh in Scotland's a beautiful place. there's a castle, and there's heroin. It's just really fun. And the great thing about being in Scotland is you don't have to understand anything anyone says.
Good.
And it's because it's impossible. And so, and the drunker you get, of course, the less possible it is to understand their accent. I'll get in a cab and they'll be like, oh, where do you want to go? And I'm like, oh, up to Calton Hill. All right. I said, I must just sound like this to them. Turn left. Turn right. Over here, tartan dude. Because they're always like, stick it down the street. Oh, brilliant. And then you're like, then they think I'm in the Proclaimers and they let me ride for free. Oh, I've got jokes from 1993. I'm still finishing off with some Bill Clinton material here at the end. About that Jimmy Carter. I should probably wrap up. Everything is going to get better. Believe me. What you want to happen is going to happen, and we're going to change everything, because this has happened a lot of times before, and 20 steps backward, 1 step forward, and all that. What's the point of bringing this up? Because 45 is Orange 45, Benito, Cheeto, Mango, Mussolini, Papaya, Pinochet, the Oompa Loompa oligarch, the pumpkin plutocrat, Kremlin-controlled carrot, sweet potato Stalin, Orange Julius Caesar, Naranja Noriega, Sieg Heil and Roy. He's Adolf Tweetler, the madness of King Orange. He is always on about Mexico. He hates Mexico. We're going to build a wall. And you've seen the wall. It's falling down. Half of it's not built. But of course, he hates Mexico. And I'm always like, what is it you have against Mexicans? I'm from California. We've been in Mexico for 500 years, and it is muy caliente. There are taco trucks in every corner. It's boss. I'm from San Carlos, as I said. No white guy named San Carlos. No one named Robert named San Carlos. Otherwise, it would have been St. Carl. But I was in Texas, right? And people in Texas were like, Mexicans, Mexicans. And I was like, Texas? What would you eat? Because what is Texas without Mexican food? Oklahoma. Good night, everybody. Thank you for having me. You've been a lovely crowd. I appreciate it. And thank you for unmuting your mics. You're very kind.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, buddy.
Love you, Debbie.
I love you, Greg. It's so good to see you.
Bye, darling.
Greg Proops, ladies and gentlemen, the cut up of the COVID comedy generation. Thank you to my comedians, Alvin Lee, Francesca Fiorentini, Greg Proops, who is the smartest man in the world. Do not get into any kind of argument about Major League Baseball because you'll lose. And all of this, as he was ragging on number 45, 45 is a big number because as of today and an executive order, you only have 45 days left and counting to get on TikTok because he's on a rage about TikTok. I think it's because he can't dance. And the more people that are on TikTok, the less people will be reading his tweets. Thank you, Vahid. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Debbie. I wanted to
stay safe.
A closing remark. We have an event coming up October 1st, letting all the cats out of big tech. December 10th, we're having a Empowering Women in the Tech Sector event hosted by Tara Abrams. It's a panel discussion on December 10th. You'll have the event invites in the next few weeks in your inbox. I want to thank all the people that made this event possible, our speakers, Janet Wheel, Reverend Dorsey Blake, Brett Wilkins, Aaron Hunt, of course, Cindy Cohen from EFF, Debbie for all her help in putting this together. And that's it. So I just want to thank everyone that attended the event, and also Mike Rufo for his music, as well as our camera crew here that's going to be doing the editing and putting this online. So thanks everyone, and looking forward to the next event with you on October 1st. Bye-bye.